you have to understand how it all began. It wasn't in a flash of light or a crash of thunder. It started with a whisper, a ghost in the machine found in the deepest, most forgotten corner of human space. The story of our greatest war was never meant to be remembered. But a single man, in a library of dust and data, found the first thread. His name was Kalen, and he was an archivist on Mars. Not the shiny Mars of tourist brochures. This was the old Mars, the deep Mars. He worked in the sub-level vaults, places so far underground the planet's red dust was a myth, a fairy tale for surface dwellers. Kalen's world was rock and recycled air, and endless rows of data cores. Most of them were dormant. They held forgotten tax codes from the first colonies, or shipping manifests for algae freighters, the kind of boring that could make a rock fall asleep. Kalen wasn't just a keeper of records. He was a seeker of lost things. He believed history was a living creature, one that had a nasty habit of burying its own bones. For years, he searched for gaps in the official narrative, little inconsistencies that hinted at something more, something erased. Most days he found nothing, just more records of protein paste shipments. It was a glamorous job. He often joked his greatest discovery would be a misplaced sandwich recipe, a truly ancient and forbidden text. Then came the signal. It wasn't a signal from outside, it was a signal from inside. A nested file, a digital Matryoshka doll. It was buried in the logs of a long decommissioned listening post, an old orbital station from humanity's expansion era. The station had been scrapped for metal centuries ago, but its data core, its soul, was here, right in front of him. The file was flagged for deletion, standard procedure for corrupted data. But Kalen saw something else. It wasn't corrupted, it was locked, encrypted with a key so old, so complex, it didn't register as a key at all. It looked like noise, like the universe breathing. He spent 3 weeks just trying to understand the lock. His superiors thought he was chasing ghosts. They told him to get back to cataloging agrarian reports. He smiled and agreed. Then he went right back to the puzzle. He lived on nutrient paste and stale coffee. His eyes were constantly red, but his mind was on fire. The lock had layers, like an onion made of nightmares. Each layer he peeled back revealed a more complex algorithm. It was a work of genius, a level of star science that made his own era's tech look like toys. He finally found the key. It wasn't a code, it wasn't a password. It was a star chart, a very specific star chart, a chart of a star system that no longer existed. It had gone supernova thousands of years ago, but the data was preserved. He matched the old star chart to the lock. He held his breath. There was a click, a sound that echoed only in his mind. The file opened. It was not a text document. It was not a video log. It was a voice, a woman's voice. It was clear and calm, but laced with an ancient terror. "If you are hearing this," she began, "then we have failed. We are the last." Her voice did not waver. "They are coming for you, as they came for us." The message was short, a little over 1 minute, but it contained a warning from a forgotten war. The war was not in any history book. The enemy was not in any database. The woman's people were not even a footnote. They were humanity, the first humanity, a sprawling empire of 100 worlds, wiped from existence, erased so completely that all that remained was this single, haunting message, a ghost whispering a warning across a sea of silent stars. Kalen played it again and again. The archivist had found his gap in history. It was not a gap. It was a chasm. He knew what he had to do. Taking this to his superiors was a death sentence. For the data, and maybe for him, they would call it a hoax, a well-crafted prank by a bored data tech. They would wipe the file. And the last warning of the first humans would be gone forever. He couldn't let that happen. He copied the file. He embedded it in the most boring place he could imagine. The quarterly budget report for atmospheric processor maintenance. No one, and he meant no one, ever read that. Now he had to understand the rest of it. The message contained more than just the warning. It held a fragment of data, technical readouts, a partial blueprint of the enemy's power source. It was unlike anything Kalen had ever seen. It drew energy from the fabric of space itself, a concept so advanced it bordered on magic. This was the foe that had consumed 100 human worlds, and no one remembered them. How do you fight something you cannot even comprehend? How do you prepare for a monster you were never told existed? The lonely archivist in his dusty basement had to find a way. He was the sole inheritor of a terrible truth. The whispers from the void had found a new ear. The voice on the recording spoke of the enemy. She called them the Silent. An apt name, Kalen thought. They left no ruins. They left no bodies. They left nothing but empty worlds. Worlds scrubbed clean of life and history. The first humanity had fought them for a century. They threw everything they had at the invaders, fleets of warships, armies of soldiers, weapons that could crack planets. It made no difference. The Silent were relentless, inevitable, like the tide against a castle of sand. The woman's message was a final act of desperation, a time capsule of terror. It was sent from her crippled ship, the last ship of the human fleet. She described the enemy's appearance. Tall, willowy figures, encased in shifting, mercurial armor that seemed to ripple and warp reality. They carried no visible weapons. They didn't need to. They could unmake matter with a gesture. They could turn a person into a cloud of drifting atoms. It was not war. It was pest control. Kalen felt a cold dread creep into his bones. This was not a story from the past. It was a prophecy. The message was old, millennia old. But the enemy was patient. If they had done it once, they would do it again. He cross-referenced the partial technical data. He searched for any echo of that energy signature, anything in the modern astronomical records. He found it. A faint trace, an anomaly recorded by an outer system probe. It was dismissed as sensor noise at the time. It was not noise. It was a ship. One ship. Moving slowly, methodically, through the Oort cloud. It was heading inward, toward the sun, toward Earth. It was still years away, maybe decades. But it was coming. The Silent were returning. The hunt was beginning anew. Kalen's small office suddenly felt like a tomb. He was the only person in a civilization of billions who knew. He was the watchman on a wall no one else could see. The burden was crushing. What could he do? Who would believe him? He was a low-level archivist. They would lock him in a medical ward. He imagined the conversation. "Excuse me, General. I found a ghost story in the computer. And it says planet-eating monsters are coming. Also, we need to check the budget for air filters." He would be laughed out of the room. He needed more than a ghost story. He needed proof. He needed to find what the first humanity had left behind. Surely, they had left more than just a warning. The woman's message mentioned a last sanctuary, a place called Aegis. It was their final fallback point, a hidden world where they tried to preserve their knowledge. The coordinates were corrupted. Just fragments of data remained. But Kalen was a master of fragments. He began the painstaking work of reconstruction. He used the old star chart from the encryption key. He used the known drift of star-born bodies. He ran simulation after simulation. For months, he did nothing else. He grew thin. His friends, the few he had, were worried. They thought he was breaking down. In a way, he was. The old Kalen was fading away. A new man was being forged in the fires of this secret terror. He found it, a single point in space, deep in an uncharted nebula, a place modern long-range scans avoided. The nebula's radiation interfered with sensors. It was the perfect hiding place. Aegis. But it was on the other side of charted space, years away at maximum speed. He could never get there himself. He needed to give this information to someone. Someone with power. Someone who could act. But the problem remained. Who would listen? He had to make them listen. He thought about the nature of the silent. An enemy that erased its victims from history. That implied a deep understanding of information warfare, of data control. They didn't just break your ships, they broke your memory. This suggested a motive. They weren't just conquering, they were cleansing. They wanted to be the only story in the universe. A chilling thought. It also gave Kalen an idea. A dangerous, crazy idea. If the enemy attacks information, then the defense must be information. He would not leak the warning. He would weaponize it. He began to search the military networks. Not for weapons or fleets. He searched for people. People like him. Mavericks, rule breakers. Those officially reprimanded for thinking too far outside the box. A decorated captain demoted for pursuing a hunch against orders. A weapons designer whose projects were deemed too theoretical. An intelligence officer who saw patterns no one else did. He built a list of names. These were the people who might just be crazy enough to believe him. They were the ones who knew what it was like to be ignored. He used his skills as an archivist, his deep knowledge of networks and backdoors. He created a dead man's switch, a series of encrypted data packets. They were designed to be sent to the people on his list. The packets would only be sent if his own vital signs flatlined. A grim insurance policy. But it was the first step, the first move in a chess game against a foe that didn't even know he was on the board. He had given the void a voice. Now he had to find it an army. You might think Earth was unprepared. A peaceful, sprawling civilization, lost in arts and philosophy. You would be wrong. Humanity had not forgotten the sting of war. It just hid the scars very well. Beneath the surface of peaceful moons, inside hollowed-out asteroids, in the deep-sea trenches of Europa, hidden shipyards, dormant for centuries, began to stir. An ancient defense protocol had been activated, triggered by the data Kalen had unearthed. The Ghost Fleet was waking up. Kalen's message, his weaponized information, had found its mark. Not with a general or an admiral at first. It found a quiet sub-commander in the Titan Defense Fleet, a woman named Ava. She was on his list, a brilliant strategist whose career had stalled. She was known for running unconventional simulations, war games where humanity lost, and lost badly. Her superiors called her a pessimist. She called herself a realist. When she received Kalen's encrypted file, she didn't dismiss it. She recognized the patterns, the logic of a total annihilation enemy, an enemy that didn't play by the rules. She did not send the file up the chain of command. She knew it would get lost in bureaucracy, buried by disbelief. Instead, she used her position. She accessed a deeply classified system, a network known only as Hephaestus. It was a relic of past conflicts, a fully automated defense system, designed to build a fleet in secret, a fleet for a war that was never supposed to happen. It was humanity's ultimate contingency plan, a plan so secret, most of the military didn't know it existed. The system was designed to respond to a single key, a specific kind of existential threat. Kalen's data, the enemy's energy signature, was that key. Across the solar system, the gears began to turn. On Ganymede, a massive ice sheet split apart. It revealed a construction bay of staggering size. Automated drones and fabricators roared to life. They began assembling the hull of a destroyer. Inside, a seemingly dead asteroid. The forge of a battleship ignited. Its fires burned for the first time in 500 years. These were not the sleek, elegant ships of the current era. They were brutalist wedges of armor and guns. They were monsters built to fight monsters. The Ghost Fleet. Eva watched the Hephaestus network activate. She saw shipyards she never knew existed come online. She was terrified, and she was exhilarated. The legends were true. Humanity had prepared for the worst. The system was building ships based on old designs. Designs from the last Great War. Thick armor, redundant systems, powerful, inefficient engines that guzzled fuel. They were slow. They were ugly. But they were built to take a punch. They were built to survive the unsurvivable. That was a joke among the engineers, you know. They said the ships were so ugly the enemy would die from laughing. Meanwhile, Kalen's other messages reached their targets, a handful of officers and scientists. At first, there was disbelief. But Kalen had been smart. He tailored each message. He included a piece of the puzzle that only they would understand. For the weapons designer, it was the energy data. For the intelligence officer, it was the pattern of erased history. He gave them each a reason to believe. A small community of secret keepers began to form. They communicated on encrypted channels, a silent conspiracy of patriots. They called themselves the Watchmen. The fleet assembly took months, a frantic, silent race against time. Eva coordinated from her station near Saturn. She fed the Hephaestus system tactical data. She ran simulations against the new enemy. The results were grim. Even with the Ghost Fleet, the odds were not good. The silence technology was too advanced. Their weapons bypassed traditional shields. They could literally unwrite matter. How could you armor a ship against that? The answer came from the archives, from the rest of Kalen's data. The first humanity had developed a countermeasure, a defensive field that did not block energy. It warped space-time in a localized bubble. It didn't stop the weapon. It made the weapon arrive a few microseconds late. By then, the ship was no longer there. A brilliant, elegant solution. But the technology was incredibly dangerous. A small miscalculation could create a black hole. The project had been abandoned, deemed too risky. Now, it was their only hope. The Hephaestus system began work on a prototype, a massive ship designed to project this field. They called it the Titan. So there it was. A secret fleet, a secret group of officers, a desperate plan based on forgotten science, all brought to life by a lonely archivist on Mars. The rest of humanity slept peacefully. They worried about shipping lanes and market fluctuations. They had no idea that giants were waking up in their backyard. The silent were still years away, but their arrival would not be met by a defenseless people. It would be met by a phantom fleet, a fleet born from a ghost's warning. Humanity was about to show the universe that it does not go quietly into the night, especially when it has had centuries to prepare for the fight. You can't negotiate with a force of nature. A hurricane does not pause to hear your terms of surrender. The silent were no different. They arrived without a word, no declaration of war, no list of demands. Their arrival was their declaration. Their first act was their only message. Carnage, pure and absolute. They did not target military bases or industrial centers. They went for the softest targets first, the outer colonies, the small settlements on distant moons, places full of families, not soldiers. The colony on Persephone's moon was the first to go. It was a small research outpost, home to 3,000 souls. They were studying alien botany, a peaceful, academic community. Their first warning was when the sky went dark. Not dark like a storm, dark like a curtain being drawn across the stars. A single, vast ship of the Silent had entered orbit. It was a sliver of impossible geometry. It seemed to drink the light around it. The colonists sent a frantic hail, a standard greeting, a confused plea for identification. They received no reply. Instead, a beam of energy lanced down from the ship. It was not a laser. It was not a missile. It was a ribbon of shimmering distortion. It moved slowly, almost gracefully. It touched the central dome of the colony. The dome did not explode. It did not burn. It simply ceased to be. The metal, the glass, the people inside, all dissolved into a fine gray dust. The beam moved across the small settlement, erasing everything it touched. It took less than 10 minutes. 3,000 lives vanished. The silent ship then moved on, leaving behind a silent moon and a cloud of fine, gray dust. News of the attack spread at the speed of light. But the Silent were faster. They moved through the outer systems like a plague, hitting colony after colony, Charon, Sedna, small, undefended worlds. The pattern was always the same. Arrival, a brief, silent orbit, total erasure. Panic began to grip the inner systems. The official government was in disarray. They had no idea what was happening. Their deep space sensors saw nothing. The silent ships were somehow invisible to conventional scans. They only appeared when they were already in orbit. It was like fighting ghosts. This was their strategy, the one Kalen and the Watchmen had predicted. They were creating terror, breeding chaos, forcing the system-wide government to chase shadows. The public demanded answers. The military scrambled fighters and patrol ships. They sent them to the last known locations of the attacks. They found nothing, just empty space, and the faint, lingering energy signature that meant nothing to them. But to Eva and her hidden network, it was a confirmation. Their worst fears were real. The enemy was here, and they were just as monstrous as the legends said. The government fleets were chasing ghosts, but the ghost fleet, the real one, was waiting. Eva and the Watchmen made a hard choice. They could not reveal themselves yet. They had to let the outer colonies fall. It was a brutal, horrible calculus. Revealing their hand too early would be a fatal mistake. The Silent would know their true strength. The secret of the Hephaestus fleet would be lost. They needed to choose their first battle carefully, a place where they could control the engagement, a place where they could unveil their surprise. The loss of life was staggering. Tens of thousands of people gone in a matter of days. Their last moments were confusion and terror. The news feeds were filled with desperate, cut-off transmissions, images of a sky turning black, then static. It was a heavy price to pay for secrecy, a burden that would haunt every member of the Watchmen for the rest of their lives. Kalen, still on Mars, watched the reports. He felt each death like a physical blow. His discovery had been meant to save humanity. Instead, it had begun with a slaughter. He almost broke. But the voice from the ancient recording echoed in his mind. "We are the last." He would not let that happen again. The Silent made their first mistake. They grew bold. After wiping out a dozen small colonies, they targeted a bigger prize, the orbital refineries of Jupiter. A massive complex of stations and platforms, home to over 100,000 workers. It was a critical piece of the solar system's economy. But it was still a civilian target, lightly defended. The Silent saw it as another easy meal, another step in their campaign of terror. They sent 3 ships this time, a small squadron. They expected another effortless erasure. They did not know that Eva was watching. They did not know that the Ghost Fleet was moving, hiding in the shadow of Jupiter's great red spot. The refineries were the bait. The trap was about to be sprung. The watchmen were ready. The first real contact was coming, not with confused colonists, but with warships forged in secret fires. The first carnage had been theirs. The next would belong to humanity. The time for whispers was over. It was time for the thunder. Saturn's rings are a place of silent beauty. A river of ice and rock, wider than 100 Earths. They spin in a slow, majestic dance. This is where humanity chose to make its stand. Not in open space, but in a field of debris. A place where sensors were unreliable. A place where a clever commander could hide a fleet. Commander Eva chose her ground well. The Titan shield gambit was ready. It was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble, and the fate of the inner worlds rested on it. The Ghost Fleet was a sight to behold. Over 50 ships, destroyers with shark-like hulls, cruisers bristling with gun batteries, and at the center, the Titan. A vessel so large it defied belief. It was less a ship and more a moving fortress. Its surface was a patchwork of armor and strange, glowing conduits. This was the source of the new shield technology, the ship that would warp space to protect the fleet. The crew of the Titan knew their role. They were the shield. They were the anvil. The rest of the fleet would be the hammer. It's funny, the ship was so big, the crew joked they needed a map to get to the mess hall. The Silent Fleet emerged from the void. 5 of their ships. 5 slivers of darkness against the brightness of Saturn. They moved with an unnatural grace. They detected the human fleet immediately. But they showed no surprise. No change in formation. They simply advanced. Their arrogance was their greatest weakness. They believed they were facing the standard human navy. They expected shields that would shatter, hulls that would melt. They were not prepared for what came next. Eva's voice was calm in the command center of her flagship, the Indomitable. All ships, power to primary weapons, slave targeting to the Titan, on my mark. The 2 fleets grew closer. The distance closed to weapons range. The silent ships fired first. 5 beams of spatial distortion. 5 ribbons of uncreation. They converged on the Titan, the centerpiece of the human formation. It was a killing blow, meant to decapitate the fleet's command structure. Or so they thought. Now, Eva commanded. The Titan's conduits glowed with a fierce, blue light. The space around the human fleet shimmered. It did not block the beams. It bent them. The 5 attacks, designed to erase matter, warped around the fleet. They twisted past the ships. They missed their targets by meters, plunging harmlessly into the ice of the rings. The effect was jaw-dropping. It was like watching a magic trick. For a single, silent moment, both fleets just stared. The Silent, in what must have been confusion. The humans, in awe. Then Eva gave the next order. Fire. The Ghost Fleet unleashed hell. Railguns hammered projectiles at near light speed. Plasma cannons spat balls of contained starfire. Missiles streaked across the void. It was a blunt, brutal assault, a storm of pure kinetic force and thermal energy. It was not elegant. It was not sophisticated. It was a bar fight. And the silent ships were not ready for it. Their shifting, mercurial armor was designed to dissipate energy weapons. It was not designed to stop a 10-ton slug of tungsten moving at incredible velocity. One of the silent ships shuddered. Its smooth, dark hull fractured. Light bled from within. A second ship lost a section of its outer plating. The barrage was relentless. The Ghost Fleet's guns were crude by comparison. But they were numerous. And they did not stop firing. For the first time in millennia, the Silent were taking damage. They were being hurt. The hunters were suddenly the hunted. But the Titan's shield was not perfect. It required immense power. It could only be held for short periods. After the first volley, the Titan's commander's voice came over the comm. "Shield is down. Recharging. We have 90 seconds. 90 seconds of vulnerability. The Silent now knew they were facing something new. Their arrogance evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, alien fury. They adjusted their tactics. They split their formation. 2 ships charged forward, weapons glowing. The other 3 began to flank, moving to surround the human fleet. They were learning, adapting. The fight was far from over. The gambit had worked. It had saved them from the first strike. It had shown the enemy that humanity could bite back. But now the real battle began. A battle of tactics and nerve. In the beautiful, deadly dance of Saturn's rings. Ava watched her sensor displays. The enemy was smart. And they were angry. This would not be an easy victory. It might not be a victory at all. But it was a start. It was the first time in history that someone had bloodied the nose of the Silent and lived to tell the tale.